So we now move to chapter 8 for module 2, where we'll be understanding the difference between listening and hearing, and what is the major difference between listening and hearing, the types of listening, and what are the barriers that again act as obstacles when there is a whole concept of listening. Now, in oral, we as per the research done, it is said that 75% of the communication that we have is in the form of oral communication. We talk to each other or a group of people throughout our day, and that's how 75% of the communication happens orally. Whereas only 25% of it happens in the written format. Okay, so much of emphasis is laid on the whole concept of listening. So listening is not just a regular process where kaan pe kuch gira and you are done with. It's a whole important process where you are using your senses to comprehend what is happening, and according to it retaining a part of it, most part of it as much as possible, and then giving the right kind of feedback that's required in terms of a response for whatever you have heard. So first, let's understand what is the difference between listening and hearing. Now, listening, as I said, is a conscious effort where you are paying attention to what the speaker is saying, how he is saying. You are using your ears, you are using the physical, it is a physical activity. So you're using your ears to listen to what the person is saying. You're using your emotional aspect. So it's an emotional activity and also an intellectual activity, because then using your mental power, your listening capacity and the knowledge that you had about it, you are able to respond to the speaker if asked for, right? So listening, we say, is a conscious activity, whereas hearing is not a conscious activity. It just happens. Here, it is more of a physical, emotional and intellectual activity, whereas hearing, from the point of view of just words falling on your ears, is just a physical activity because you're just using your ears to it. We say listening is more active because when you're using these senses and a question is asked to you, only if you listen to it properly will you be able to comprehend, understand and reply to it. In hearing, you will not be able to do that. So it's more like a passive process, not an active process. Listening can become tiring. Why? Because you're really paying attention. You're trying to remember as much as what has fallen over to your ears. Whereas hearing is not at all tiring because no efforts are being taken for the same. Right? This is listening is more higher in terms of the status, whereas hearing is lower in terms of a status, because it's just, again, as I keep repeating the same thing again and again, that they're just words that are falling on your ears. Right? This is a permanent kind of an activity. This is a temporary activity. You may not really retain much of what's falling on the ears, right? So by and large, we understand that listening is a most important activity, and we may use hearing and listening synonyms, I mean alternately at point in time, but there is a difference between the two, right? Now let's move forward. In continuation to listening, now let's move to one small concept where we understand the 5-step process in terms of listening. So the very first step in listening is with regards to receiving. As a listener, I am first and foremost receiving certain sounds falling on my ears, and I am accepting it. I am paying attention to it and moving on to the second stage, which is the interpreting stage. I took those words that fell on my ears, and now I'm trying to make sense of what it means, right? So receiving could be, maybe I am listening to a lecture with regards to time management. Interpretation would be, okay, so these are the strategies I need to use to be able to manage my time effectively. Then we move to the third step, which is the restoring stage. Okay, whatever I have heard, how am I storing it in my brain so that after a few days, if at all there is an examination, or if at all there is a practical application of it, not maybe an examination perspective, the fourth stage, the evaluation stage, not necessarily an examination, but how I really can use these strategies given to me in this particular session and make the best of my time. So evaluation, so story से we move to evaluation कि हाँ ये चीज मैंने आज समझी है. 7 steps, maybe 7 strategies डिस्कस की थी, उसमें से एक या दो मुझे याद है, तो मेरी retain capacity क्या है. And then evaluation parameters that when now I'm using these strategies that have been told to me in terms of evaluation, will this suit, will this match to what I am right now doing? They may have told me, hey, get up early in the morning at 5 in order to have the right time utilization. But I sleep late in the night. So am I able to work on that strategy, or will I have to rework? Will I have to make certain alterations in the strategy? So that's where the evaluation process takes place. And last, when we say that is a response that you give in regards to the same. कि evaluation कर लिया कि हाँ ये strategy के हिसाब से 5 बजे उठ के 10 बजे सो जाओ, but मैंने कैसे इसको समझा है मेरे response के हिसाब से. I have to start my day probably at 8 in the morning because I sleep late in the night. So whatever strategy, then they will be shifting as per my clock zone, right? So this is the 5-step process in terms of listening. Starts with receiving, interpreting, storing, evaluating, and then responding to it in the said way. Then we move to understanding the various types of listening. Okay, which are the various types of listening? It starts with you being an empathetic listener or empathetic listening, and the second one is sympathetic listening. So let's take the two of them together. In sympathetic listening, you are just being as a listening person or just being there to listen to the person who is depressed, upset, share his heart out and just give him a basic level of condolence कि ठीक है अच्छा हो जाएगा, you know, fine, and don't worry, everybody faces hard times in life. Whereas empathetic listening is implying, okay, or in a way giving the condolences because you yourself have gone through the same thing. It's like being in their shoes and giving them a way out of it, giving them your thoughts and opinions so that they are able to overcome that particular thing. Sympathetic listening, example perspective, we can say a friend of yours has failed in an examination because of the fact that he has lost his loved one, right? Anybody in the family has lost his loved one. So sympathetic listening, it's okay, dear, happens, कोई नहीं, तू वापस से एग्जाम दे दे, अच्छे से सब हो जाएगा. And you're just there, you listen, or maybe you let the person rant out कि क्या यार, I lost my family also and I failed in my exam also and I don't think life is good enough anymore and I really feel like a failure, this that, and you just sympathetically tell them कुछ नहीं यार, होता है ऐसा life में, don't give up, this that, you are done. Empathetic listening is where you are really trying to, you really probably would have gone through the same kind of a situation and you tell them, I can understand what you're going through, rant out as much as you want, then let's sit together and solve this problem. Let's look at how now we can make you overcome this problem, how we can make you study for your NTKT exams and make sure that you pass through it. Okay, so you're really sitting there, being there for the person. So the first two types of listening are your empathetic listening and your sympathetic listening. Then comes the third kind of listening, which is known as fake listening. That is where the listener is just trying to pretend to listen to what you have to say and in a way kind of not really giving the right kind of responses to the speaker, not really letting the flow of communication go properly and breaking the way how the speaker tries to communicate with you. So that is known as fake listening. Then the fourth type of listening is the appreciative listening, where you are listening to them and you are nodding your head. That nodding is basically an appreciation in the form that okay, whatever you are saying, yeah, I agree with it, or maybe yeah, it makes sense. हाँ, ऐसा होना चाहिए, ऐसे हो सकता है. So that's where you say you understand your appreciative listening. Then comes your evaluative listening. Okay, now what is evaluative listening or critical listening? Is from the point of view of the person who is listening to is going to evaluate on what you have said. Example perspective could be a Viva voice examiner taking the Viva of a student, or an interviewer listening to whatever question he's asked to the interviewee and listening to what he has to say and really making sense of it. That okay, मैंने उसको ये situation दिया and okay, this is how he is going to. So I think yeah, he fits the organization policies. He fits the culture of the organization. This is what he's going to do. And in the first example, when I talk of the Viva course examiner perspective, okay, ठीक है, उसको अपना content पता है, उसने जो project किया है, he knows that I can grade him good marks. So that's how evaluative or critical listening can take place. And the last one is selective listening. The selective listening concept is where you are only listening to what is a matter of concern for you. So they may be discussing throughout how stress management can take place, or I mean, what is stress and how to manage stress in these stressful times. And maybe you are just interested to listen to how to manage stress at workplace. You're not interested with the other all aspects of it. So that's where you see that it can be discriminative because you are listening to only the content you are interested to, or selective listening, or we can also put the name as discriminative, selective, or content listening. So these are the major 6 types of listenings that we have heard: empathetic, sympathetic, appreciation, fake listening or wandering listening. Then we have discriminative, selective, or content listening, and then the last one is evaluative critical listening. So we move to the last part of this chapter where we'll be understanding the various barriers to listening. What acts as a barrier to listening? Very first one, as we know, or as we can really connect to, is the noise in the surrounding. Any kind of noise that distracts the listener can act as a barrier to listening. The second is your physical conditions, whether it be from the speaker perspective or the listener perspective. The speaker has some speech deficiency or a speech defect, and or the listener has some hearing defect, or at that point in time of the conversation that's happening or the speech that he's listening to, he may really be tired, exhausted from the day's work, may have a severe headache, or may not be, in terms of your health aspects, may have a heavy cough and cold. So his attention is probably towards the health issue that he's facing, and that acts as a mental health defect in terms of barrier to listening. Then the third kind of barrier that acts as a listening barrier is with regards to your wandering attention. Apparently speaking, the average speed of how a person talks is approximately 120 to 130 words per minute. And in more of a formal speech, it comes down to somewhere like of 100 words. So this is how the speaker's words per minute will fall. And as for the research, the listener hears it or listens to it 3 times faster. So maybe when there is a gap in what the speaker is saying and listener is saying because of the number of words spoken per minute, there can be some sort of attention span issue with the listener, and then his attention may start wandering here and there. Okay? Or in the other parameter of it is to understand that maybe the speaker has said something that triggers a certain set of emotions in the listener. Okay, you're listening to some time management strategies, or like stress management issues, or how to deal with a broken heart. And listening to one of the ways to overcome it, you start connecting it with the issue that you have, and your attention goes to that particular topic altogether. So physically here, mentally not here. That's the best example, or that's the best way to understand wandering attention. Then the next kind of issue or barrier or a problem or an obstacle that can come in listening is with regards to having a certain amount of mental block or an emotional block, also known as deaf spots. Now, certain people just dislike listening to ghost stories, supernatural stories, or they just hate when you talk about subjects with regards to history. They just don't find themselves comfortable with it. So, if there are a group of people discussing it, they will just move out from it probably. If there is no optioning to move out, if they are in cramped spaces or they have to be there, they are not there, they are not listening to it. They are just letting the words fall on their heads. Right? So these are a few parameters, and from the point of view of listener. Now, two important parameters also come from the fact of how the speaker is when he is trying to communicate. That can act as a barrier. Can be in the terms of first his appearances. We always look up to, love listening to people who are really well dressed. Well dressed, good looking people attract us. Okay, especially when on a public forum. People look at how the person is dressed. If it's a formal occasion, wearing of blazers, maybe wearing of saris for girls, or wearing churidars or kurtas, pajamas that are decent enough, not very blingy, not very see-through, not very transparent. So your focus is with the speaker, the way his or her hair is made, how is his appearances in terms of the grooming skills. And one thing that people notice the very first thing in the opposite, a stranger that they meet, is the kind of shoes the person wears. That speaks volumes about a person. So if the person is wearing torn, messy, dirty, kind of flip-flop kind of chappals or slippers to speak on a certain major forums or podiums, or even if they say, for example, we go for interviews, the importance of grooming, dressing right makes a lot of difference. So they always say wear formal shoes, wear close pair of shoes, it gives a decent appearance. So when the speaker is not properly dressed in the right attire, that can lead to a barrier to communication. Means the listener may not really be interested because he's just put off by what he or she is seeing in front of him. And the second can be with the way the speaker is communicating or connecting with the audiences. Is it like a rata-rataya speech that he is coming and giving? Or is it like an interactive session? What is the tone that the person is speaking? What is the pitch? What is the language that the person is speaking in? Is the language the same language that the opposite person understands? Even if it's a two-people communication. We understand English. I'm explaining this topic to you in English. If I was speaking to you in French, maybe, and if most of you wouldn't know French, would you be able to really understand what I'm trying to say? And then will it be listening or would it be hearing? So these are the barriers that come in terms of barriers to listening. What should be done to overcome these barriers, or the other way around question could be, what are the rules, regulations one needs to follow when they are in the process of listening? So always from the speaker perspective, make sure that you are speaking softly, not real soft in the fact that the opposite person can't hear you, but soft enough such that if it's a two-people communication in confined spaces, it's audible enough for the opposite person. If you're speaking on a mic, don't shout on the mic, speak in a decent tone. Practice what you know. Get in the right kind of a subject that's going to interest the audiences. Make sure that your pronunciations are clear. Make sure there are no ers and hers and buts and ifs and such kind of in your speech. Make sure that you know your audiences well. Is it a young set of audience? Is it an oldie set of an audience? Is it the working class? Is it the male? Is it the female? So based on that, you would know how to make your pitch right. You'll be able to connect instantly with your audiences. They're good dressings in terms of the fact that when you are on stage, when you're in front of people, when you try to present yourself, you are appealing in terms of your physical appearances. With the right kind of colors that suit you, with the right kind of hair done, with the right kind of jewelry, accessories that are required, with the right kind of footwear that's necessary. Not overdoing your perfume also can put off people. Right? So these things from the speaker perspective. Things from the listener perspective would be that really be there if you really are interested in a particular topic, in a particular speech that's being given. Okay, if it is a situation where you really have no choice over being or not being, but it's like a meeting, make sure that you are really not doing a lot of fake listening or pretend listening. Really try to comprehend with what they're saying and try to retain as much as possible, because maybe that point in time it may look like it's a waste of time or a waste of what you are hearing. Someday, sometime it can be used. Don't just fall flat on the appearances. Sometimes appearances can be deceptive. The person may look like he or she is not well dressed and may not know a lot of content, but eventually it's all here, and how it comes through the vocal parameters affects the way of listening. So when all these things can be taken into consideration both by the speaker and the listener, the process of listening will become all the more entertaining, all the more engaging, and will lead to the right kind of consequences. Will make the communication cycle a complete cycle, a proper sorted cycle. Sender, receiver, feedback, proper, done. With this, we finish the chapter of listening and learning, and we move to the next chapter. Thank you.